Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in Europe.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Okay, guys, next up we have Leicester City. Brandon's crazy eyes and Pep's bald head behind Bickler over there. Bickler, what do you make of the fact that they have not done anything over there at Leicester?
Just over here trying to keep the peace between these two. I mean, listen, you got a lot to be excited about this transfer window. If you're a Leicester fan, you extended your best player from last year, who was named after a fancy estate somewhere in England, in Dewsbury Hall. I mean, look, they had some injury issues last year, especially on the back line. They're going to return Fofana, Castagna, Evans, Justin. All those are going to be back. That's definitely going to help them. I just don't know with Brendan Rodgers, man, if that's ever going to be a team that knows how to defend properly. That just, I think it's a systemic issue based on his philosophy, and that's the problem. I don't know if it's going to necessarily matter what pieces they end up with. Vardy's going to Vardy. That's the good thing for them. The bad thing is you got two very promising young strikers that are the future behind him, and that's got to get sorted and figure out if it's going to be Daka or Iheanacho doing the business there for them. They've got some beautiful pieces, like what are they going to be able to hold on to Harvey Barnes? Are they going to be able to hold on to Tillemans? Those are going to be questions that are going to be at the heart of how well they do this year.
And is it the matter of that then, Gally? Just the fact that they're relying on the fact that when all healthy, they had like a really good team. And honestly, the last, the 2 seasons before, barring a late collapse, they would have, they were in the contention to go to the Champions League and all that good stuff. But then they seem to keep falling off. Or is this just a Brendan Rodgers thing? What do you make of it? I mean, as Liverpool fans, we are very familiar with Brendan, his good and his bad. So what do you make of it?
I was going to say, I mean, did they really fall off, or did Brendan Rodgers get close to seeing a goal at the end of the rainbow and just never get anywhere near it as soon as the pressure got tight? Because to me, his sides always seem like they're just set up to be as confused as that look on his face. And I think that's where, Paul says, will they ever be able to defend? I don't know that he's ever positioned anyone properly on a corner. I'm not sure. I still don't think he has a guy covering either post and he gets scored
21 set piece goals allowed last year.
And here I was without even the numbers. Thank you, Paul. Makes me look smart. There'll be a first for everything on this show. That's me getting looked smart. That is not Paul being doing his job.
I would say both.
Well, that's a first too.
You were right.
Right.
It's a great point. It was a disappointing campaign for them. I do think injuries had a lot to do with it. But 52 points, just 4 out of Europe, as disappointing as it was, they still finished in 8th. I mean, as bad of a weird year, they were in 8th place. And I'd argue if Fofana was healthy and hadn't had that horror tackle in Spain, that really kind of set their whole season on a weird trajectory. I mean, when you buy Vestergaard under like emergency break glass pretenses, and then he has to play the first month and a half because Johnny Evans can't get on the pitch. I mean, they went from having Wesley Fofana, a player who at 19 was on the cusp of breaking into the French team, to having Yannick Vestergaard starting at center back. So, I mean, he was dealt a curveball late. I do think I actually think they probably would have finished above Manchester United had Fofana been healthy all year. With that said, if you're a Leicester supporter today, you got to look at this window and say to yourself, wait a second. We were 2 points and 1 point away from playing in the Champions League. We had one bad year, and this is the investment that the ownership is putting behind the club. And Rodgers said it recently, like, you can only work with the players they buy you. I love this club and I respect their principles. But to say I'm not disappointed with the squad right now I wouldn't be telling all the truth or something along those lines. So he's frustrated. My question is have they realized that Brendan Rodgers isn't the guy? Maybe he was the guy to get from where they were to where they are, but he's not the guy now. So why go out and buy him 3 more assets? But he's got such a big contract that they bring him in. He manages throughout the beginning. They have a horrific start to the season. Fixtures wise, they have one of the toughest fixture lists the first 8 weeks. So I wouldn't be shocked if he wasn't there by middle of the season. So it might be a changing of the guard for them, kind of in a slow move. But to Paul's point, their hardest thing is just keeping hold of their talent, making sure that someone doesn't come in for an offer for Madison, who's playing the best football right now that he's played in his whole time at Leicester. He was amazing the last 10 match weeks of last year. He was arguably the best attacking midfielder. And to Paul's point, maybe the second best attacking midfielder might have been Dewsbury Hall. So they're building something there. There's talk about Newcastle making big bids for Harvey Barnes. Still looks like a player to me with a whole bunch of talent, but can't finish in the final third. And I don't know, you pay as much money as is being bandied about. So I think they have a lot of question marks, but I still think they're a top half team. And we'll get to our predictions, but I still believe they're a top half team.
Honestly, the last part about where they end up really depends on, what we've been talking about in terms of like who they can hang on to and who they can't. Because some of the names mentioned, like Tielemans, and, is very crucial because it's, right in your spine there of the team, and it's not an easy spot to fill. You can get healthier overall. I think that will solve some of the defensive issues. But to me, with Brandon, it's usually the system more than the players. It's the system that leaves, you kind of like, what's the good word to use? But it vulnerable, I guess, to a good attacking team, just letting way too much space against good teams. And in Premier League, you're playing against teams that have quality across the board. And I think that might still come back to haunt him unless some changes are made. Do you think the injuries or the lack of them, a healthy Leicester City, is able to solve those problems, Bickler?
I mean, certainly increases their odds of solving it. I don't like, my comment about it being an issue with the system kind of answers that. I'm not sure that they can solve it because I'm not sure that this is a problem that he's had everywhere he's been, essentially. So I don't know if it's necessarily an issue of them being healthy. And honestly, Leicester's one of those teams, man. Depending on what happens with their key players, whether they can hang on to their key players, and what happens with their manager, this is a team that could push for a Europa spot, or it's a team that could be 12, 13, 14 on the table. I don't know if there's a team that we are going to discuss in our previews that has a wider range of probable placement on the table. So they're interesting from that standpoint. There's a lot of dynamic moving parts to this that can really kind of flip their season one way or the other.
And the most important factor of that is that Brandon, you're saying, to determine where they end up? If Brandon is able to change the system, because we know that's not going to happen.
I think the most important part is them hanging on to the young players, Tielemans and Harvey, I think, in Madison and that Dewsbury Hall, and having that core healthy with Vardy. And if Vardy can stay healthy, I think they got some opportunities. If they can get Daka to continue to emerge, I'll tell you what, Daka has had a phenomenal preseason. He's been on fire this preseason. Dewsbury Hall and Daka lead the team in goal contributions between the two of them. They're both tied at 4. So, I think if they could keep that young core healthy, I think Leicester's survived on defensive vulnerability. They've been there. They have been successful with a leaky defense. So, will they ever crack top 4 with that? I don't think so ever. I don't think they can. But can they be up there fighting for 5th, 6th, 7th? For sure.
Yeah, when you look at their squad, there's a lot of quality across the board. It's up top, like you're saying, a lot of young, good guys in the back, very solid midfielders. You mentioned Madison. There's a lot of quality throughout. It's just a matter of being, playing solid football consistently So when we come to prediction time there, Gally, where do you see them ending up? I agree with Bickler where out of the teams we talk about, it is probably possibly one of those teams that can go all over the place. But where do you project them to end up?
Yeah, I said top of the table, and then I look at my notes and I realize I wrote down 10 to 14, so with a regression. So I should probably stick with what my actual gut told me. I said that their first 8 matches was hard. They have Arsenal, Chelsea, United, and Spurs, plus Villa and Brighton. They could literally get 2 points out of those 6 matches if things don't go right for them. And I think it all stems down to Fafana. If Fafana is back to his best and can help Soyuncu get back to what was making him be, rumored to be on City's radar and other big clubs' radar, I genuinely think that they could, do better than my 10 to 14. I think Timucin is gone because a club like Leicester has to cash in on assets. And this takes us to, maybe to a topic we'll talk about on Liverpool or we talked about in our podcast this week. I don't think Leicester can afford to let a guy like Timucin get and just hang on to him for his walk year. And he's told them unequivocally, I will not sign an extension, and he is free at the end of the season. So I think they have to secure a fee for Timucin. They have not Boubacar Smart. They have another midfielder they bought last year that they really like. Papis Mendy came on last year and finally started to give some meaningful minutes. I think they could figure out a way to work without Timucin. It'll be a knock to him, but it's all about Vardy scoring goals and them eventually turning it over to Daka. I made this comment when we talked about Everton, but I'll say this. If Rodgers were relieved of his job, if I were the Leicester owners, I would be front and center trying to hire Pochettino because there's enough young talent here that looks a lot like the young Southampton team he took over and even a young Spurs team he took over. Hits on the counter, needs defensive solidity. But I'll put this one out there. Rumors today came out that Nice made a bid for Kasper Schmeichel, and Schmeichel told ownership that he's interested in playing overseas and a move. If they lose Schmeichel, they could be in trouble because I don't know that the Ward kid's ready to be an everyday EPL Premier League keeper. And I think Schmeichel is actually a underrated goalkeeper in the Premier League. I think he's done a lot to save them a lot of points.
Why would Schmeichel want that move?
It's called money.
I understand that, but it's also like prestige, especially for Schmeichel, whose dad's, obviously is like a legend in the league. So why? I mean, it's kind of like an odd move. I can see for.
It's weird to go to a one-team league and you're not on that one team.
They're playing more European football this year than Leicester City is, and they're offering them a bigger wage package. And I think the dude has gotten to the point where he'd like to play overseas and get an opportunity. And he's not probably going to get another one. He turned down going to Roma after they won the title because he wanted to stick it out with the club, and he became club captain. Maybe he's just ready for a challenge, or maybe by floating out there that he would be interested in Nice, he's letting everybody else out there know that the club captain is ready to leave Leicester City. And maybe it's another move.
See that as a better scenario where he's like, hey, if something good came about, I'm looking.
But if they lost him, I think that would be a massive blow this late in the window because I think that would seriously dent. We talk about how much they struggled defensively under Rodgers. I'd say Schmeichel actually is a positive when it comes to reducing the amount of goals made up by their defensive instability, and that would be a crucial loss to them. So, that would have a lot to do there with me.
Where do you have them ending up, Bickler?
I have them in that 8 to 10 range. And I think that I could see them having a tough start and Brandon going. I think that if he doesn't have full support of that locker room and full support of that club leadership, I could see him walking, whether it's voluntarily or involuntarily. And then I could see somebody coming in and sort of righting that ship. Generally, when there's a manager change for a club, they usually get a little bit of an injection in energy. And I could see that there's enough talent there that with that and some defensive stability, they could ride that into that sort of 8 to 8 range.
Yeah, I had them as 8 to 10 as well. It would be harsh to kind of let Brandon go after a tough start, just by, like Gally is saying, just like looking at their schedule. That would be a tough one because, once that run is over, they start playing like, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Leeds, games where you would, kind of like bet on them for getting the 3
Games
points.
that you'd like a new manager to kind of bet in.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's probably great for a good manager because he's gonna be able to get those points. But yeah, it would be harsh on him. But I do have him 8 to 10. I think that squad has so much talent that even they have that talent where you might not play great, but they will get you something with their goals and stuff like that. I just get that sense of the field. So I have him as 8 to 10 as well. Let's see what Brendan does with those boys.